Welcome back, you guys. So in this video, I'm going to be drawing a bird. The inspiration for this video is I used to do birding back in college for one of my classes, and that really introduced me to the different bird species around. And I like the colorful birds. So this is the yellow-headed blackbird, and as it suggests, it does have a yellow head. Since I've drawn this bird a couple times, I'm not doing the typical shapes that I do when drawing something new. Like usually I'll draw a circle, a square to give the basic rough shapes. Instead, I'm doing an outline because I've done it before. It gives a little bit more character. It makes it a little less realistic and more cartoony. I think for a lot of the animals, I try to go for a little bit of more realism. But if I've drawn it over and over, I can start introducing my style into it, stray away from the realism and make it a little, exaggerate the proportions to give it a cartoon look. That's what I like to. I want to do semi-realism as I draw, mainly. So for this, I'm just roughing out the edges of it so it doesn't look super perfect, because birds and even humans, we're not perfect. We have imperfections. So that's what I'm trying to suggest. And the little line you see me drawing in the middle is to distinguish the head from the rest of the body, because as the name would suggest, only the head is yellow, whereas the rest of the body is this black. Now, I'm not going to use pure black, as you'll see. Many new artists think that you have to use the darkish shadows and whatnot when you're making black, or like your dark areas, but really it's all about what colors are lined up against the colors that you're adding on. So if I have a white area, any color that I add on to that is obviously going to look dark in comparison to the pure white of the page. Anyway, I'm going on to the feet. Now, the feet I just drew originally as little twigs, or as you say, little snowman arms, because it's something I've always really struggled with. I don't think many people pay attention to the feet. It's more of the body. And then as I add in the color, it's not going to really make much of a difference. This is one of those things you got to trust the process, and you'll see me going over this a few times. But the color and then the line work really makes it pop, and you're not going to be looking like, ooh, the feet are messed up. So it doesn't bother. Right here, I'm just doing some refining work on the bird, widening it up, making some darker lines, just to help me for when I go in with the alcohol markers at the end. I'm leaving some white space to designate, and I'm jumping back down to the feet to try and figure out the final thing that I'm going to be satisfied with before I let the markers and line work speak for themselves. Just like our hands, I will say they're sisters, not twins. And that's exactly what you'll be expecting here. Of course, the back one is further back, so it looks a little bit smaller, but they both end up at the same place, which is how you want it to look perspective-wise. So today I'll be using the Copic markers, the 72 set, but I'm just picking out the yellows that I'm going to be using. My lightest yellow is the YG00, followed by like more of a mid-tone, which is Y15. And then I'm transitioning to the orangish yellows at the Y38 and the YR16. They don't have they don't use O for orange, they use the YR, and that's the indication of that. I'm first going in from lightest to darkest. I'm starting with the YG00 below like the neck or the nape of the bird, under its beak, followed by the warm Y15. That is going to be like one of the most predominant colors besides the YG00. And some people go darkest to lightest. That tends to save on the amount of ink used, but I just learned going from light to dark. That's especially useful if you're using lower quality paper. Here I'm using a crescent blending paper, so it is a bit higher quality, and it's easier to blend. It blends pretty naturally. But if you're using some paper that is not necessarily made for markers, this is one of the easiest techniques to do, going from your lightest to your darkest. And as you know, with alcohol markers, you can always darken something, but you can't lighten it. So this way I can see if there's areas I need to darken, I can go over them with the darker color. And then I'm going in with the darkest still yellow technically, Y38. But to me, it appears a little bit more orange. But of course, that is just because it's up next to something that's super commonly referred to as yellow. So colors, really, the interesting thing about them is we perceive them based on the color that they're next to. So that on white paper alone might look more yellow than next to something that is a light pale yellow. That's just how color works in color theory. So now I'm just adding the last few shades of Y38 in, and then I'm transitioning back to the Y15, which is the second lightest color, to try and blend that out. I want it to look pretty smooth before I go in with the cast shadow, which is the deepest shadow, which I am using here. That is the YR16, which is the orange. Now I'm transitioning to doing the beak and as well as the eye and the rest of the body. Now, the bird is mainly black, but I'm not going to be using it black because that's going to dull out the colors too much. And instead, I will be opting for this is a dark purple. And I know it kind of looks black, but that's just because that's what our mind perceives since it's next to yellow, which is such a really light color. You'll see me leaving these white spaces, and that's for the gray that I'm going to be using as I transition to the lighter parts of the black. So for the black, which is actually a purple, it's the BV29 in the Copic. And then I'm transitioning to the W5. So as I started on the head, I went from light to dark. But as I'm going to the body, I'm using... In this way, it saves the amount of ink you use because you already go over some of the darkest to the lightest in order to blend it. So you're not having to constantly put color down and go back over and then put color down. So it's one way if you want to save some ink, this is how I would recommend you do it. The grays I'm using here are W5 and W3. These are warm grays. Copic also has some cool grays, I think. They're the C1, C0, those are the other versions of gray. But I wanted this bird to look lively, and so this is why I opted for these grays and not the other ones. So I'm finishing up the beak, and then I transition to filling in the chest with the Y15, covering some of the white spots. On the chest, there's like black dots as it transitions from the neck to the head. And then you see me trying to make the feathers of the tail look a little darker. So I go back in with the VV29. The one thing about alcohol markers is the more that you add onto it, the darker it becomes. And the line work is really what's going to bring this picture to life. So I'm using the micron pens here. I'm starting off with the 03, and then you see me transition to one that's a little more fine for the beak because that's more delicate. And going around the neck, the next few shots are going to be sped up a little bit because my hand is covering the camera shot, and I didn't really realize that as I was recording. So that you guys aren't sitting through a lot of my hand being over, I decided, let me speed this up big time. And so that is what you will see here. But I'm wanting to do various thickness. One way to go about it is the darker areas should have a thicker outline than the lighter areas because that's more of a cast shadow being on it. That would look thicker if you were seeing a real bird in real life. So that's what I'm trying to emulate here, which is why you'll see me go over various areas, especially like on the leg, multiple times so I can get that thickness that I'm trying to go across. And around the eye, you'll see me go over with the BB29, which is what I'm considering the black here, to make it a little bit darker to represent one of the real yellow-headed blackbirds. I have the gel pen that I used on the wings because that's actually white. I tried to use some of the white, but it needed more white highlights, so I had to go in with the gel pen. So I'm going to zoom in close so you can see the fine details of the bird from the eyes to the neck down to the rest of the body. Eventually, I will zoom back out so you can see the bird overall. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see my little droplets next time. Until then, take care, everyone. Bye.